Hello, my name is Louis Sargeant, but my friends called me Lou. This is kinda like Back to the Future, so listen up as I take you through the story of my life. I was born during the Prohibition years in 1921. If I had survived a little longer, November 19, 2022 would have been my 100th birthday. My parents, James and Olive Sargeant, were both born on the Caribbean island of Nevis, in the latter part of the 19th century. Nevis had been a British colony for centuries, and there was nothing to do there if you didn't want to slave in the fields cutting sugar cane. So they both emigrated to the growing Caribbean community in New Haven, Connecticut around 1910. There were so many of our people there, it was like a little Nevis. Mom and Pop soon moved from New Haven, to the Bronx, and ultimately to Brooklyn. My brother Lloyd was born just a year before me, and with Pop being the photographer he used to get us dressed up in our Sunday best and pose us like mannequins. It seemed to take forever. Sometimes he would use explosive flash powder to light his portraits, and we really didn't like that. A few years later my little brother was born, and there were three of us: Lloyd, Bertram, and me. I was born on November 19, 1921. James Sargeant was a real Renaissance man, who was a total jack of all trades. He was self-taught in photography, electronics, and music. In the early 1940s, James and Olive bought an elegant brownstone on Macon Street in the Bedford-Stuyvesant section of Brooklyn. It was in an area that was mostly Irish. Before long, the neighborhood had changed, and was soon, mostly, made up of people from the Eastern Caribbean, or Antillean region. In the early 1940s, I was drafted, and served in the 659th Artillery Unit, as a tank mechanic. Horrible Jim Crow segregation was the rule of the land in Fort Hood, Texas at that time. You see, the place was named after a Confederate general. So needless to say, it was a really awful place for a black man to be stationed. They treated the German prisoners better than they treated us Negroes. Anyway, that terrible experience taught me how to repair or build pretty much anything. The great Jackie Robinson served in that unit at the same time as I did, and they tried to court-martial him. Soon after the war ended, I married Anita Stinbar. We had a rocky relationship and soon went our separate ways. All's well that ends well, and the relationship produced my first beautiful child, Carol, who was born in July of 1943. For a while after that, I worked as a furrier for a few years and saved up enough money to buy my first car. With my newfound freedom, I was making the rounds at all of the Brooklyn bebop spots, from the Blue Cornet to the Putnam Central. In the early 1950s I met the woman who would become the love of my life, Doris Miles, or, as everybody called her, Dot. After a brief romance lasting a couple of years, we had our first and only child, Kenny, on May 23, 1953. In the mid-50s, my military background started paying off, big time. With the passage of the Housing Act of 1949, New York's slum clearance program was in full effect, and the groundbreaking community of Lenox Terrace was on the rise. Being able to fix tanks had taught me everything from plumbing and electrical to fluid dynamics, and made me an attractive candidate to run things. As a result, the developer, Dr. Godfrey Nurse, brought me on to keep an eye on virtually all aspects of construction. I became an integral part of that community where I worked over the next 30 years, tending to the mechanical aspects of 1,600 apartment units, on 15 acres in the middle of Harlem. The residents at Lenox Terrace ran the entire gamut of the black elite class. From Moms Mabley and Charlie Mingus to Percy Sutton, Ella Baker, and even the notorious Bumpy Johnson. It was undoubtedly a who's who of Black America. What an amazing experience I had, helping to build that very prestigious community where I worked until my demise in 1982. Had I lived longer, I might have reached my 100th birthday on November 19, 2022, and had a chance to see some of what you all call social media. Anyway, please take a moment at some point this week to tip a glass of Cuddy on the rocks, for me, as libation. And don't worry about a thing, as I am resting peacefully in Cypress Hill Cemetery in good old Brooklyn, New York.